There's a moment where your brain realizes something your body already knew. That quiet feeling that something is wrong. Not dangerous, not yet, just wrong. And by the time you finally understand it, it's already too late. This story is just a man, a real one. This happened in 2018, a small town, quiet, predictable, safe. The kind of place where nothing ever happens until something does. The girl in this story, we'll call her Anika, was 22 years old, final year of college, part-time job at a bookstore, lived alone in a rented apartment. Her life was normal, and that's exactly why she didn't see it coming.
It started small. So small, she didn't even register it. One evening, walking back from work, she noticed a man standing across the street. Not unusual. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there, looking. Not directly at her, but close enough to make her feel noticed. She brushed it off, because that's what people do. But here's the thing about stalking. It never starts creepy. It becomes creepy, slowly. 2 days later, she saw him again. Same street, different spot. This time, sitting on a bench. And this time, he was definitely looking at her. Just staring. She looked away quickly, heart picking up speed for no reason she could explain. When she glanced back, he hadn't moved.
That night, she told her friend. They laughed. Maybe he thinks you're cute. Maybe he's just weird. Maybe you're overthinking. And she wanted to believe that. So she did. That is what everyone would think. But then, 3 nights later, 9:47 p.m., Anika was in her apartment, scrolling on her phone. Then, someone knocked on her door. 3 times. Slow, deliberate. She froze. She wasn't expecting anyone. Deliveries? Friends? No reason? Another knock, softer this time. She walked slowly toward the door and did what everyone tells you not to do. She looked through the peephole.
There was no one there. She opened the door anyway. The hallway was empty, but something felt off, like someone had just been there. That night, she barely slept. Every sound felt louder. Every shadow felt closer. She was paranoid. And around 2:13 a.m., she heard footsteps outside her door. Slow, dragging, then stopping, right outside. She didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't even blink, because she knew someone was standing there on the other side of the door. And then, nothing. The footsteps disappeared. The next day, she saw him again, the man from the street, standing outside her building. And this time, he smiled. Not a friendly smile, not even a normal one, just slow, like he knew something she didn't. She walked faster, didn't look back, but she could feel it, that feeling again, being watched. That night, she got a message from an unknown number. Nice blue shirt today. Her stomach dropped. She hadn't posted anything, hadn't told anyone. No one should have known, right? She blocked the number, told herself it was coincidence, and it wasn't. Over the next week, another message. "You shouldn't look so scared." Another, "I like it when you don't notice me." Let that sink in. He wasn't just watching her, he was studying her. She went to the police, filed a report. They asked questions. "Do you know him? Has he threatened you? Any proof?" She had none, just a feeling and messages from a number that kept changing. They told her, "Be careful." That was it. She started changing her routine. Different routes, different timings, looking over her shoulder every few seconds. But it didn't matter, because no matter what she changed, he was still there. One night, she got home early, around 5 p.m., and something felt wrong. The door, it was slightly open. She knew she locked it. Her hands started shaking. She pushed the door open slowly, step by step. Silence. Nothing looked stolen, nothing looked broken, but something was different. Her bedroom door was open. She always kept it closed. She walked toward it, slow, careful, every step louder than the last. Inside, everything was rearranged, not destroyed, just moved slightly, enough to notice, enough to feel like someone had been there, watching, touching, waiting. You didn't notice, did you? She ran out of the apartment, didn't stop, didn't look back. Police came, checked everything, but there was no forced entry, no fingerprints, no evidence at all. Which meant he had a key. That night, she stayed at a friend's place. Didn't go back. Didn't sleep. Didn't feel safe. At midnight, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A photo. It was her room, taken from inside. "You left too early." They never caught him till date. No name, no face on record, no explanation. But here's the part that stays with you. Years later, she still checks behind her, still double locks every door, still avoids eye contact with strangers. Because sometimes the scariest part isn't being followed, it's realizing you always were. And the worst part? He could still be out there, watching someone else, waiting for them to finally notice. In the spring of 1946, an entire American city stopped going outside after dark. Stores closed at dusk, streets emptied. Families barricaded themselves indoors with loaded guns, and every night they waited. They were waiting for a man in a white sack mask, eye holes cut out, nothing else, who only came out at night, who hunted couples, who killed without pattern, without motive, without mercy. They called him the Phantom. He was never caught, and almost nobody talks about him. This is the story of the Texarkana Moonlight Murders, and once you hear it, you won't forget it.
Texarkana, 1946, a border town, half in Texas, half in Arkansas, sitting at the edge of the American South. World War II has just ended. Boys are coming home. People are exhaling for the first time in years. It's the kind of town where you know your neighbors, where teenagers go to the drive-in on weekends and park on the back roads afterward, where nobody locks their doors. That was about to change. February 22nd, near midnight, Jimmy Hollis, 25, and Mary Jean Larry, 19, are parked on a quiet road outside town, one of the lovers' lanes the local kids all knew. A man appears out of the darkness.
He's carrying a flashlight and a gun. And he's wearing a white cloth mask, a sack, really, with 2 slits cut out for eyes. He orders them out of the car. He beats Jimmy with the gun, fracturing his skull. He attacks Mary Jean. Then, headlights appear in the distance, and just like that, the man vanishes back into the dark. Both survive, but what they describe to police will haunt Texarkana for the next decade.
Police treat the attack as an isolated incident, a robbery maybe, a drifter. Then, 5 weeks later, he comes back. March 24th, another couple, another lover's lane. This time, he doesn't leave survivors. Richard Griffin and Polly Ann Moore are found dead in their car, shot at close range. No robbery, nothing taken, no clear motive. The town is shaken, but it's still not connected to the first attack, not publicly. Then, April 14th, 3 weeks later, almost to the day. By May, the Phantom does something no one expected. He changes his pattern. He stops targeting couples on lovers' lanes. He finds a farmhouse. May 3rd, Virgil and Katie Stark are home, northeast of town. It's late. Virgil is sitting by a window when a bullet shatters the glass and strikes him in the back of the head. He dies on the floor of his own home. Katie runs. The Phantom follows. He shoots her twice, once through the nose, once in the jaw. The bullet lodges under her tongue. She survives, and she runs, bleeding, barely conscious, down the road to a neighbor's house. When police arrive at the farmhouse, Virgil is dead, and the Phantom is gone, again. Nearly 400 people are arrested in the weeks that follow. Texas Rangers flood the town. Reporters arrive from across the country. The FBI gets involved. Every lead goes cold. And then, as suddenly as he appeared, the Phantom stops. No more attacks, no body, no arrest, no goodbye letter. He just stops. Paul Martin and Betty Jo Booker, 17 and 15 years old, leave a dance at the local Masonic Hall. They are found the next morning in separate locations, shot. Betty Jo's saxophone case is found nearby, abandoned. Nobody knows why they were separated. Nobody ever will. Now the town knows. This isn't random. This is a hunter. The newspapers give him his name, the Phantom Killer, the Moonlight Murderer. And the dread that settles over Texarkana is unlike anything the community has felt, even through a world war. Because the soldiers they feared were far away. This one was their neighbor.
Here's what makes this case different from every other unsolved murder you've heard of. In 1999, over 50 years after the killings, an anonymous woman begins making phone calls. She contacts surviving family members of the Phantom's victims. She apologizes. She says she's sorry for what her father did. Police try to trace the calls. They can't. The prime suspect in the case, a career criminal named Ewell Swinney, never had a daughter. So who was she? Whose father was she apologizing for? Nobody knows. The calls stopped. She was never identified. There's one more thing. Around the time the Phantom's attacks ended, a man was found face down on the railway tracks north of town. He'd been struck by a train, but investigators found evidence suggesting he had been placed on the tracks already dead. Some believed he was the Phantom, that he had finally been killed or killed himself before police could close in. His identity was never confirmed either. Which means the Phantom Killer may not have just escaped justice. He may have taken his secret with him to wherever he went or wherever he was buried and smiled doing it.
Every Halloween, Texarkana screens the 1976 film based on these murders, The Town That Dreaded Sundown, at the very park where one of the attacks happened. people sit in lawn chairs in the dark, watching a movie about a masked killer who walked those same paths. The case file is still open. The FBI records are public. The survivors are gone now. The witnesses are gone. Even the prime suspect died in prison for car theft, not murder. And somewhere in the DNA of American horror, in Halloween, in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, in every slasher film with a masked figure in the dark, lives the shadow of a man from Texarkana who put on a sack, cut 2 holes in it, and taught a whole town what it meant to be afraid of the night. He was never a headline. He was never a Netflix series. He was just a phantom. And he's still out there, in the only way that matters, unsolved.
There's a photograph taken at 8:15 in the morning, March 18th, 1990. In the photo, a young man sits in the basement of a museum in Boston. He's 23 years old. His name is Rick. He's wearing a security guard uniform, but his wrists are wrapped in duct tape. His ankles, too. The tape is wrapped around his head, over and over, from his forehead to his chin, covering his ears, covering part of his face. He had been there for 6.5 hours, alone, in the dark, left there by 2 men he let in through the front door. And while Rick sat in that basement, those 2 men walked through one of the most prestigious art museums in America. They had 81 minutes. They used every second. When they walked out at 2:45 in the morning, they carried 13 works of art with them, paintings by Rembrandt,
Vermeer, Degas, Manet, worth around $500 million. To understand what happened that night, you first need to understand the museum, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, and why what was stolen can never truly be replaced. Isabella Stewart Gardner was a wealthy Boston art collector, brilliant, eccentric, completely obsessed with art. The largest art theft in history. They were never caught. The paintings were never found. And Rick, the man in that photograph, spent the rest of his life trying to answer one question. Did he let them in by accident, or did he let them in on purpose? This is the story of one night shift that changed everything.
She spent her life collecting paintings, ancient artifacts, rare tapestries, masterpieces from around the world. In 1903, she opened her private collection to the public inside a beautiful Venetian-style palace in Boston. But there was one strange rule. Before Isabella died in 1924, she wrote something into her will. Nothing in the museum could ever be changed. Nothing could be moved, nothing replaced, nothing rearranged. Everything had to remain exactly where she left it, forever. The museum itself became a frozen moment in time. By 1990, the Gardner Museum was famous, beloved, and dangerously underprotected. The security system was weak. There were motion detectors, but they didn't alert police directly. The guards were expected to check things themselves. The cameras recorded onto VHS tapes, and overnight, the entire museum was protected by only 2 guards. Just 2. In 1988, a security consultant warned the museum about these problems. The museum reviewed the recommendations, but they decided the upgrades cost too much, so nothing changed. And on the night of March 17, 1990, St. Patrick's Day, 2 guards arrived for the overnight shift. One was Randy Heston, quiet, reliable. The other was Rick Abath. Rick was 23, a former art student, a musician,
part of the underground creative scene. He liked rock music, he loved art, and he had worked the midnight shift for months. He knew the museum, he knew the rules, especially one rule. If someone rang the bell after hours, you do not open the door. You call the police. You do not let anyone inside. That night, Rick started his shift at midnight. 61 hours later, he would still be answering questions about what happened at 1:24 in the morning. The beginning of the shift felt normal. Rick did his patrols, checked the galleries, logged the motion sensor activity, sat at the security desk, waited. At some point before 1 a.m., Rick made a strange decision. He entered the Blue Room, a gallery that wasn't part of his normal route. The motion sensors recorded it.
He stayed briefly, then left. Years later, investigators became obsessed with this moment. Because one of the stolen paintings, a Manet painting, would later disappear from that same room, and somehow the thieves never triggered the motion sensors there. But at 1:24 a.m., none of that had happened yet. 1:24, the buzzer rang. Rick looked at the security monitor. 2 men stood outside, both wearing police uniforms. One leaned toward the intercom. "Boston Police, we got a report of a disturbance on the premises." Rick looked at the monitor, looked at the uniforms, thought about the rules, and then he opened the door. Later, he said they looked like real police officers, and when police tell you to open a door, you open it. What happened next took less than a minute. The moment the thieves stepped inside, one of them shoved Rick against the wall. "This is a robbery. Don't do anything stupid." Rick was handcuffed. The second guard was called over. He was restrained too. Within minutes, both men were tied up in the basement, wrists bound, ankles wrapped in duct tape, tape around their heads, around their ears, over part of their faces. And then the footsteps went upstairs, and the museum went quiet. For the next 81 minutes, the 2 thieves walked through the museum with complete control. They knew exactly what they wanted. They cut priceless paintings from their frames, a Rembrandt, another Rembrandt, a Vermeer, Degas sketches, a Manet portrait, 13 pieces in total. At one point, one of the thieves returned to the basement. He looked at Rick and said, "You're going to be on the news tomorrow." Then he walked back upstairs. At 2:45 a.m., the thieves left. They loaded the artwork into a waiting car and disappeared into the Boston night. Rick and Randy stayed tied up in the basement for more than 5 hours. At 8 that morning, the next shift arrived. The front door was slightly open. Nobody answered. Police were called. Real police this time. When they found Rick, the duct tape had been around his head for over 6 hours. Upstairs, the museum walls were empty. And decades later, those empty frames are still hanging there.